The Vikings make history with their first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft and rounded out the 7-person 2024 draft class with several new and exciting weapons. Welcome inside TCO Studios. I'm Tatum Everett alongside Alec Lewis from The Athletic and Vikings Entertainment's Gabe Henderson, and we are ready to talk and dive into this class of 2024. You know, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the general manager for the Vikings, likes talent, the ability to develop them, and he wants a great culture fit. So guys, let's take a look at that class real fast. You've got first-round draft pick J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. They didn't pick again until the 4th round, Khyree Jackson, a corner out of Oregon. Then in the 6th round, Walter Rouse and Will Reichard, a kicker from Alabama. And then in the 7th, they added some guys in the trenches, Michael Juergens, an offensive lineman, and Levi Rodriguez, a defensive tackle. And in this show, we are going to see how the national draft experts grade these things. So we'll begin here with Mel Kiper Jr. from ESPN giving the Vikings a C+. Pro Football Focus gives them a B+ grade. Carmen Vitale from Fox Sports, an A, and Cam Mellor from Pro Football Network, an A-. So it feels a little bit all over the place, on the higher end, kind of like my report card up there. But Alec, how do you feel about these draft grades for this draft class?
Yeah, it's definitely better than my report card. A good start. Grading draft picks is so hard. These guys, you're not going to know what they ultimately become in like 3 years. So it's a hard process. I think the Vikings got a lot of positions that they were looking for, that they sought, and guys who they feel like fit for them. So whatever the grades may be publicly, that should be ultimately what matters for the present.
Yeah, I agree with you. You really don't know what these guys are going to turn out to until about 2 or 3 years down the road. So ultimately, the Vikings just wanted to fill some voids on their roster, and they believe they did that, especially addressing the number 10 overall selection in the first round with J.J. McCarthy. So as long as Kwesi and Kevin believe they got an A+, or at least an A, that's pretty much all that matters.
I wanted to expand on Pro Football Network's Cam Mellor because he wrote in his report card the day 3 stretch was never going to be Minnesota's draft grade, was going to sway Minnesota's draft grade too far in either direction, because in round 1 it all added 2 franchise-defining players on either side of the ball. So let's get to those 2 guys, right? Okay, we're going to start with the Vikings identifying their future at quarterback. And Alec, you may know these 2 guys, the Athletic's Nick Baumgartner and Scott Dochterman. They had to say this about the pick. They gave J.J. McCarthy specifically just this pick an A, saying a very tough, aggressive passer and mold of his former coach, Jim Harbaugh. He may need to learn behind Sam Darnold for a minute, but this is a great long-term fit with Kevin O'Connell, and he could be more ready early on than some believe. Alec, we'll let you take this one because these are your pals over at The Athletic. What do you make of them saying he may be ready early on than some believe?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're going to thrust him right into the fire. I think about it a lot like I used to think about baseball prospect call-ups. You want everyone in the building to be wanting to tear down the decision maker's door and and have them like, guys, it's time to bring this guy up. Yeah. And I feel the same way about J.J. McCarthy at quarterback. You want everyone in the building like, why is he not starting? And at that point, you know that's probably the right time. So I love my colleagues. They did a great job in the analysis. That's what I'd say about J.J. And there are reasons to think that it could go quicker, but they're just not going to rush it. It matters too much. It means too much. And operating long-term is too much in Kevin O'Connell's psyche because he wants this to work out for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just keep going back to 2019 when Kevin was in Washington. He was the offensive coordinator there, and they drafted Dwayne Haskins with the 15th overall selection. Dwayne, God rest his soul, ended up playing a little bit too soon. Now, if you look at J.J. McCarthy, Kevin O'Connell has probably learned from that and said, okay, let's not rush this guy into this opportunity. Yeah, he's going to be really good in the NFL, but let's not rush him into it and ultimately let him build that confidence up to be that quarterback of the future in which this entire Minnesota Vikings front office believes J.J. McCarthy can be that guy.
And confidence he has in spades. He has 63-3 record since high school. A proven winner, someone that I think these guys are obviously very excited to get into the building. Another addition there, following the departure of Danielle Hunter and DJ Wonnum, the Minnesota Vikings needed to add some pass rush specialists. They get that in the first round again, trading up 6 spots to draft what could be considered the most athletic pass rusher and edge, Dallas Turner. CBS Sports' Pete Prisco gave the Vikings an overall grade of B-. highlighting Dallas Turner's pick. He said that was a good move. He will be a big time rusher in Brian Flores' scheme. Turner's best pass rushing days are ahead of him. I will allude to this a couple of times. Alec, you are from Alabama. You have watched a lot of Alabama games. What do you like about Dallas Turner in Brian Flores' scheme in particular?
Everything, I think. This guy is as good of a fit with Brian Flores as you could have probably found defensively in the entire draft. They got that player at 17. Pretty wild. I don't think anybody expected that to be the case, but athletic, explosive. Really, I mean, he played with Will Anderson, knows how to operate professionally, just pretty much everything you need in terms of a versatile defender in Brian Flores' system.
And I think similar to J.J. McCarthy, Dallas Turner is a guy that you don't have to rush in. You already have a Jonathan Bernard on one side and an Andrew Van Ginkel, two guys that Brian Flores and this Minnesota Vikings team brought in free agency. So when it comes to a guy in Dallas Turner, all you have to do is put him in on some of those third down pass rush situations and let him be himself. Once he starts to build some of that confidence, I believe that's when he'll get that starting role. But I do believe Dallas Turner will be in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year simply due to his versatility, his strength, his long arms, and everything that he puts on tape week in and week out when he was at the University of Alabama.
I see you shaking your head there. You agree with that Defensive Rookie of the Year call?
I mean, look, I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Like Nick Saban on the telecast said, this guy reminds me a lot of Dante Hightower. And if you know anything about Brian Flores, you know he was in New England with the Patriots defense, and Dante Hightower was a menace.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking you might have a more explosive type of player like that. The sky really is the limit. And again, I don't think anybody in this building that we're sitting right now expected Dallas Turner to fall to 17. So the fact they got him, you know there's just a lot of people who are over the moon.
For sure, and his arm length is something that I think coaching staff, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and their press conferences keep talking about at length.
That was creative.
Like that?
Yeah.
Just his arm length as being something super special
nice.
for the size that he is. Thank you. If we're also talking about someone who's a little more rangy, who's tall, that would be the 4th round pick that was picked first on Saturday. And I'm alluding to cornerback Khyree Jackson. Now, Chris Knox from the Bleacher Report gave the Vikings an overall A- grade, saying GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah largely focused on developmental prospects on day 3, though cornerback Khyree Jackson a notable exception. He was the 43rd ranked prospect on the Bleacher Report board and can get on the field as early as week 1 of this season. Alec, when you saw the Vikings take that pick first, what was your reaction? First on Saturday, obviously.
They got their guy. I mean, I talked to people in the building going back to the Senior Bowl who talked about this guy. I mean, they really liked his length. I had a conversation with the coach at Alabama who said to me, he reminds him a lot of Dre Kirkpatrick, who was a first-round pick, 6'3" guy. He's like, but Kyree's maybe faster and more athletic than Dre Kirkpatrick. So, I mean, this guy's had an unbelievable arc to get to where he is. 3 junior colleges, once worked at a grocery store and was Employee of the Month. He served chicken at Chipotle. I mean, this guy has been all over the place. But with this staff in this system, given his talent, it's going to be really interesting to watch his development.
Yeah, the story alone makes any Vikings fan excited because there's so many things that you can pull from and say, okay, well, this is the reason why he's playing here because he's been at a certain point in his life. So that's where you start when it comes to getting better. And I just remember listening to Kyree's press conference after he got drafted, and he's already breaking down how he uses his size against bigger receivers and then smaller receivers. As a rookie, a guy with that knowledge this early on, that says a lot about who he can be under this Brian Flores scheme. And I think if you put him in right away, now you can move the Byron Murphys of the world inside, a spot where he played when he was in Arizona. I believe having Khyree Jackson on this team, you have so much more flexibility at that defensive back spot. And ultimately, I hope it works out for him here in purple.
He's a little bit older than a normal rookie. He has a swag about him. I like his attitude, his character. You could just tell that that's going to be an interesting fit in this cornerback room because I think a lot of our guys may not be that kind of like normal cornerback attitude. They're kind of like smooth operators, but then you put Khyree in the mix, it could add a lot of that CB trash talk attitude.
I think at the defensive back unit, if you're a corner back in the league, you have to have a little bit of trash talk or a little bit of nastiness to your game. And people call it dog, but to have that chip on your shoulder, I think that's what you need, especially when you're going against Justin Jefferson every day in practice and training camp. You better talk to him because JJ is going to talk back. So to have that guy in the room that's going to ultimately lift up everybody else's spirits and everybody else's energy, oh my gosh, I cannot wait until training camp this year.
And I think about just defensively as a whole, with the talent that they have infused in this building from last year to this year, it will create an environment, I think, in OTAs and a lot of these training camp practices that benefits the development long term. I mean, Shaq Griffin is another outside cornerback they brought in. Mekhi Blackman, we've talked about, he was here last year and was drafted last year. I mean, you add all of these pieces together, the front, like we've talked about, and you have an environment that to me will be much different and probably a lot more nasty, competitive this upcoming fall.
Well, NFL.com's draft expert Chad Reuter wrote about Jackson, calling him a Reek Woolen type corner. He also rated the Vikings overall B+. And so he had this to say about some of the later round picks, as in the 2 offensive linemen that the Vikings have added. Walter Rouse is a strong, experienced lineman who takes over for departed veteran Oli Udoh as the swing tackle. And don't overlook Michael Juergens' chances of making the roster. Obviously, 6th round and 7th round respectively. I will actually go to you, Gabe, first and see your thoughts on Walter Rouse.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy, when you first turn on the film, he has the size. He's 6'6", he's 325 pounds, and when you're that big, your anchor is your best attribute. When I talk about anchor, that means when a defensive lineman tries to bull rush you, you're able to drop your hips and stop him from bull rushing you. Granted, there are a few things that Walter Rouse needs to work on as far as athleticism, but as long as you have a base, your coach can coach everything else from there. I believe he's going to be a guy that can be a swing tackle. He can be a good backup, but at the same time, when his number is called, he can come in and make plays immediately. So I'm excited that he's on this roster.
For sure. I mean, in the NFL, you're only as strong as your depth. So speaking of that, going to Juergens, he played center his entire career, but was moved to guard this last season. Alec, what are your thoughts on where we could see Juergens' future? I mean, Chad thinks he could. Don't be surprised if he's on the roster.
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised at all. He produced incredibly well at Wake Forest, and it was interesting talking to scouts kind of around that day 3. You thought the Vikings would probably take some offensive linemen. Some people were skeptical of the interior and what was there, but this guy, I mean, I know Ryan Griggs in the front office. I know a lot of people in the front office really identified his production. It's like, why not this guy? I mean, he can move. He did produce. He performed well at Wake Forest at guard and center. I completely agree. Would not be surprised if he is ultimately backing up a Garrett Bradbury or other interior guys at those spots. I mean, he's an older guy. You could just tell he knows how to handle his business. So another just a pick that's probably not going to create a grade at this point, but you'll look back and be like, man, that could have been a really important depth piece come week 8 when you have to navigate injuries.
I think these 2 guys also personified the type of offensive lineman that this group really likes. Very cerebral, intelligent players. You've got Rouse, who started at Stanford, had aspirations of being a surgeon, and now you have Juergens, graduated early, earned his MBA from Wake Forest, and 2 things I definitely would not have been able to do. So it's just, you can tell they're very cerebral, very intelligent guys. So upon reflecting on this draft pick, GM Quesido Fomensa also said, I got to draft a kicker. That was fun. So I'm kicking it to Alec again. Another Alabama guy joining the Vikings roster, this time in kicker Will Reichard. He had an amazing career. What can Vikings expect from that guy?
Yeah, I don't invoke like my own fandom into much of my commentary ever, because you can't do that as an objective journalist the way I am. But as an Alabama watcher my whole life, and especially in the Nick Saban years, I'm not sure there was another kicker who walked out onto that field that you felt as confident with as you did watching Will Reichard. Like, I can name other guys who nobody cares about. Adam Griffith, Cade Foster, Lee Tiffin. Those guys run out on the field, you're like, I'm not sure. Will Reichard, you felt like he was going to make the kick, and I think it's the mentality that stands out, and it's what stood out to the people in this building.
Yeah, Dallas Turner called him a cold-blooded sniper. Did I take your point?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay.
I was going to say that the fact I mean, he is a cold-blooded sniper, and I get why Dallas.
Words, not mine.
I get why Dallas said that, because if you're a defense, you know that you're going to get a break. You're going to get 3 points, and then you finally get a chance to hold. Look, I know Dallas Turner, being a defensive lineman, a kicker is your best friend because you know you're going to get points. But I look at Will Reichard and I say, hey, look, he leads all of the NCAA. He led all of the NCAA in points in his career. He is a guy that understands the team, because when you look at like the locker room, specialists, they're that unit that gets out of meetings early. They're at lunch early, or they're doing certain things that's away from the team. If you read some of the reports from The Athletic that I read, Will Reichard is a guy that is a team first guy. He's in offensive meetings, he's in defensive meetings, and he understands what team means. And honestly, as a kicker, that's a really good locker room guy if you're trying to build your brand.
And he didn't have to stay for his 5th season.
Right.
He wanted to get better at kickoffs, to get better at 50-plus yard field goals, which is becoming a little bit more of a norm, I think, in the NFL, more so than it used to be. So definitely exciting to see the kicker competition that's going to unfold at training camp. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, I mean, new quarterbacks step in the building.
Yep.
New kickers, I mean, it's as energetic and electric as you could probably get.
And speaking of energetic and electric, that is what we got in the 7th round pick, the final Vikings pick in this draft. Levi Drake Rodriguez was just revealed this week as the Athletics Prospect X. And so the Athletic takes a smaller school prospect, follows them throughout the draft process, and then reveals anonymously, and then reveals who they are right after they're drafted. This year, Levi Drake Rodriguez, it's a really great story if you haven't checked it out on The Athletic. Gabe, this is someone who I know you're probably really excited to add in there just for the vibes and the culture fit alone.
I mean, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah said Levi Drake's top 30 visit here a few weeks ago was one of the best visits he's ever had as a general manager. And he said Levi Drake Rodriguez lit up the room when it came to the interview portion of the equation. And I look at this guy as he started at a small school, ended at a small school, Texas A&M Commerce, I believe, and then went to a bowl, I guess an all-star game at the end of his career, and then got promoted to the Tropical Bowl, which ultimately he was the MVP of. So this guy is a guy who was the first person in, last person to leave, and he understands what team is. And I think he's another Kwesi-esque type guy when it comes to drafting someone in the later rounds of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, Levi Drake Rodriguez is one of the most interesting, wild stories, and I think he'll become a quick fan favorite in training camp. Like you mentioned the Tropical Bowl. It's this all-star game that I'd never heard of, and I talked to his position coach there. He's like, yeah, Levi ran out. He had a feather on his helmet. I didn't know what was going on. Then he just started cooking guys on the defensive line. It was like, all right. I mean, this guy, I'm really interested to see against pro competition what he looks like and how he performs. But I mean, if you look at some of the hardcore stats, like he really performed at Texas A&M Commerce, which is a school I did not know existed 4 days ago.
I used to sideline report for that conference, the Southland Conference, so I do know a few of those schools, know them very well. They're really tough players, so I'm excited to see that.
You only get but so many shots in this league, and when you turn on the film and a guy from that small of a school gets an opportunity, that says a lot about who he is. And granted, the guy just put on 20 pounds this offseason already, so he's already getting ready for what some of those opposing offensive linemen are going to try to do to him.
Now, there were some guys who did not hear their name called, but that doesn't mean they can't make the roster, i.e. Ivan Pace Jr. this past year. So the undrafted free agents, the Vikings added 17 of them, and there are a couple of names that are getting some buzz. Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA and Dwight McLaughlin Jr. out of Arkansas. So we've got Gabriel Murphy an edge, Dwight McLaughlin Jr. a corner. I'm going to have you take Gabriel, Gabe, because of the Gabe.
It's kind of weird because like
the
only time I hear the word Gabriel is if my mom's mad at me. So when I hear it, I'm like, Mom, are you listening to this? But look, Gabriel Murphy, I think he's a baller. Defensive end from UCLA this past year. I know everyone is talking about Liatu Latu from UCLA last year, who people mention as the best pass rusher in the NFL draft this year. Opposite of him was Gabriel Murphy getting double teamed, and he still ended up with 8 sacks last year. How he went undrafted, I'm not sure, but we've seen crazier things. Ivan Pace last year went undrafted, started linebacker week 1. So I'm not going to say Gabriel Murphy is going to start, but when you turn on the film and see who he is as a player, it's hard to believe that he won't be able to make some plays in purple sooner rather than later.
And McLaughlin from Arkansas.
Yeah, both of these guys really highly rated preferred signings for all teams across the NFL. I've had multiple conversations, and you probably got to give a lot of credit to Brian Flores, both for how much guys want to play for him, but also probably his recruiting pitch to some of these guys. I mean, McLaughlin, he started at LSU, really instinctive cornerback. He's got the prototypical size. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but I think his instincts make up for it in terms of ball production. So, I mean, cornerback has been and will continue to be such a competitive room in this building, and I expect him to compete alongside a Khyree Jackson. I mean, it should be pretty high level following that competition, and Dwight McLaughlin will certainly play a role in it.
Yeah, I think last year we did the same thing on the same show. We talked about Ivan Pace and Andre Carter, and that's turned out pretty well for the Vikings so far with big futures for both of them.
It's like you guys know somehow.
You know, somehow. You know, it's because we follow guys like you, Alec, the media guys out there. But no, seriously, please follow Alec. He writes for The Athletic on the Vikings beat. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Gabe. Appreciate all of you guys' insight. You're going to leave him hanging there, Alec.
It's all good. Pete Versus does it. Paul Allen does it. I'm always like one of these guys at the end, and they always leave me hanging. But glad to have you on, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much, and we hope that you have enjoyed this 2024 draft grade recap show. If you want anything Vikings related from the 2024 draft, be sure to go to Vikings.com or the Vikings app. Thanks for tuning in.